Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Jack Out of the Box. In today's episode, I have another one of the people from my support crew here in Wollongong, Allie Watchirs.
Hello, Jack.
So today we're probably going to get off the job sort of talk with Scott last week, where Allie's met some pretty famous people. So, I thought we could start there. If you'd like to let us know some of the people you've met.
Yeah, I think in my previous life I used to do a little bit of work in hospitality and sports management and stuff like that. So I was really fortunate enough to meet some pretty crazy people from a sporting background, some music people. I used to work at the entertainment centre in Wollongong. So back in the day, there was a lot of people that sort of come through that building that all had pretty unusual stories and famous in different sort of ways, obviously. I've met some really random sort of people in my travels, whether it be here or overseas. But, I was talking to you the other day about some crazy stories, but I made a bit of a list, and then I thought you could sort of elaborate on which ones that you want to talk about specifically.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. I've argued with a few people. I've had some pretty interesting arguments.
Yeah, I did just see that on your list. You argue with Jack Johnson.
I argued with Jack Johnson. I've had an argument with Daniel Johns. I've had an argument with Jimmy Barnes. I'm not the arguing type normally. I've had some pretty interesting words with Pink. That was probably something that I remember. Was pretty crazy back in the day. I've met Shaquille O'Neal. I've met Bryce Courtney, who's an author in New Zealand. I've met the Prime Minister of Scotland and New Zealand in a conference that I'm probably not supposed to talk about. I used to work for the Princess of Thailand, Princess Razi in Novotel in New Zealand. I've met Richard Branson. I've met Richard Branson's submarine driver, which was a really interesting story. I've met loads of Olympians through my time with Sydney 2000 at the Olympics, and also my association with basketball and the Dragons and the Hawks and Watchirs and the Brumbies and people like that. I sat next to. It's really interesting when you sit on a plane, actually, when you're flying from place to place, because you sit next to some really interesting people. I sat next to a roadie for Nirvana.
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting.
That I didn't believe was a roadie for Nirvana until he undid his pants on the left-hand side of his hip. He had a number, and all the roadies for Nirvana had certain numbers in tattoos, which I started to believe him. I've sat next to a gold medalist from Thailand. Met the All Blacks, did the Rugby World Cup when it came to Wollongong. So, that's probably my list, Jack, of people that I can think of at the moment.
I think I'd be interested to go back and talk about your conversation with Pink.
Yeah, so that was when I was working at the entertainment centre and in Wollongong, and she was a very young artist at the time, and with a bucket load of attitude, to be completely honest. And she wasn't hugely famous back then. She was obviously selling out small venues. I think the entertainment centre holds about 5,000 people. So that was the level that she was at the time. And so I was the catering manager, and she was walking around the back of the house with no shoes on, and we'd only just broken a heap of glass. And I sort of went past her because we weren't allowed to approach any of the artists at the time, which is completely fair. But she walked past me and I walked past her, and she had no shoes on. And I said to her, mate, you're going to cut your feet if you keep walking around the back of here with no shoes on. And she sort of gave me a mouthful of attitude and cheek at the time. And I sort of laughed, and she sort of, she was warming up for a show. And that was one of the shows where she started the start of the show coming out of a pool of water under the stage. which was really quite cool. And she was practicing for that. I suppose to cut a long story short, her and I had some words, and then I went and watched her show, and I thought, oh my God, this girl's amazing. And I've sort of been in love with her ever since. And to be honest, followed her around the world ever since. Been to heaps of her concerts. But a year later, she came back to the same venue, and we sort of spotted each other in the hallway. And I did sort of say to her, do you remember me last year? We had a bit of a chat about all the broken glass and how I didn't want you to cut your feet, and you'd probably end up suing me. But she sort of laughed, and we had a bit of a chat, and she walked away. So, yeah, but then she's obviously become a very famous artist, and I love her music, and, yeah, that's my little 5 seconds with
cool.
Pink.
Yeah. So then also, Jimmy Barnes is a bit of a Aussie icon. So what exactly did you argue with Jimmy Barnes about?
So Jimmy Barnes, in order for his voice to be so raw and crackly, I guess, he's got this really unique sound. He used to gargle pure alcohol just before he went on stage. And this particular time, he was doing it outside my office door. And he was, it was interesting because that was how he was warming his voice up. But it was just the wrong place to be doing that, to be completely honest. And we needed to find him a spit bucket quite quickly. He was just, maybe caught me on a bad day, and I might have caught him on a bad day. But I sort of said to him, there's change rooms for this sort of behaviour. But he thought it was funny, and we had words, and away he went. Yeah, it was weird. I fell over Jack Johnson's surfboard, so that was a bit of an injury.
Like Banana Pancakes Jack Johnson, right?
The singer?
Yeah.
Willies and Byron?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's Banana Camp? What's that?
It's one of his songs.
Oh, is
it? It's pretty good.
I should know that. Yeah. He parked a surfboard outside my office, and I fell over it. And the entertainment centre in Wollongong's on the water, for the people that sort of don't know that. And he thought the office was closed and the doors were closed, and you had this huge... And to be completely honest, I'll be honest, I didn't know who Jack Johnson was. But this particular dude decided to put his surfboard outside my door, and when I tripped over it, I was in a bit of a hurry and fell over a surfboard, and I sort of yelled down the corridor, "Who owns this bloody surfboard?" And this dude come around the corner. He said, "Oh, it's mine, I'm sorry. I'm just going for a surf out the front." And we had this conversation about, the surfing spots. And I said, "Well, there's no surf out the front. Like, why don't you go to a really nice spot?" And we had a conversation about where to go surfing, and I sent him out to Sandon Point, which I thought was just a beautiful beach, which is not far from here. And that conversation ended, and I went back to work, and he went surfing. And then 3 hours later, I was in the venue, and I had my sister or somebody was in the crowd actually, and I got them tickets, and I went and sat with them to say hello really briefly for 5 minutes. And I was apologising because the tickets were so rubbish. They're in the roof. And she said, "Oh, Jack Johnson's supposed to just come on in a minute. Why don't you wait?" And I said, "I don't even know who he is, mate. I don't know what songs they sing, blah, blah, blah. I'm just so tired. I want to go home." And the lights went down, and everyone started clapping and screaming, which meant I couldn't walk down all these flights of stairs in the dark because I thought I was going to trip over. And this Jack Johnson came out on stage with a Save Sandon Point T-shirt on, and had told the crowd about how he argued with this girl in the hallway this afternoon, and she told me to go surfing in this most amazing spot, and I'm just so embarrassed, and I'm trying to get inside my shirt. And my sister's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh my God, that was me. That's who he's talking about, me." And she's like, "What?" And I said, "I know, I fell over his surfboard," and told her the story. And he's telling this story in front of 5,000 people, and I almost died that day. I was a bit embarrassed. That's the Jack Johnson story.
Okay, that was worth it.
Yeah, but he donated some money to the Save Sandon Point Trust, so that was nice of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel Johns, I argued with him about fish. He was trying to be vegan at the time, and I said, fish isn't really being vegan, and he was upset about the way that his fish was cooked. And anyway, we had words. We probably shouldn't talk about that online. Never mind. But yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting group of people you've met.
Yeah, the submarine driver for
Yeah.
So I met Richard Branson when he was taking over the terminal in Sydney when they'd bought out, I think, Ansett Airlines it might have been, and they were swapping over their terminals at domestic. And he signed my book because I was walking through the airport, to be honest, minding my business, and I had just previously been given a copy of his book on a flight. And it just so happens that the guy was walking towards me. And I'm looking at my book and I'm looking at him going, oh, this is the same dude. So I just, and he looked at the book and went, would you like me to sign that? And I said, yes, please. Which is really weird because, post that, I was on a flight somewhere. I can't tell you where I was going, but I got talking to the woman that was sitting next to me, and she was his submarine driver. Is that what you call it? Driver?
I would assume maybe pilot.
Yeah. And apparently one of his islands burnt, or his house burnt down on one of the islands or something, and she was being made redundant. But he had this little submarine that he used to go around his own island in, and she was the pilot for that, and she was out of a job because the apparently the resort or the house or something burnt down and she was moving.
Oh, okay, so it was kind of Richard Branson's ex-submarine pilot.
Correct.
Yeah.
I would say that would be correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that looks like you've got to the bottom of your list.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I can't. You mentioned the Brumbies before. That's sort of my Super Rugby team. So, do you want to elaborate on what you had to do with them?
Yeah, they were one of the tenants at the Wollongong Entertainment Centre, and I can't tell you what year that was. It might have been 2001 or something like that, and they were playing some of their games at Wynn Stadium. So I was doing corporate catering at the time because I was heavily pregnant, and we had to, so the ACT Brumbies were training with us and also playing some of their away games, I think. So I was sort of in charge of looking after them and making sure they were fed and watered and behaving mainly, which is always interesting when it comes to teams and sport teams. But, yeah, they were really nice people. Most of them. They were all pretty good.
Yeah, I had a bit of a interaction with them. We were on a school excursion at Canberra Uni, and the Brumbies were training at their gym as we walked past, and I was like so excited, and all the other school friends who came on the trip had no idea what rugby union was, so they were like, why are you so excited? We don't even know who these guys are.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, yeah, I grew up watching rugby my whole life, so yeah, it was pretty cool.
I think it's really good that when you sort of grow up with a certain sport and then later on you sort of become involved and you see things in a different light. I've met John Eales and I didn't know who John Eales was, and things like that. So if rugby was really important to me, I guess he would be my sort of, hero go-to, like my Michael Jordan,
Yeah, it was sort of like the time where David Pocock was sort of pretty big in the Wallaby squad, so... Yeah, when we walked past the gym and he was standing there, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Especially when you get to meet people or see people that you feel like are just so unreachable, but yet they're still people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all just the same. They're just good at something that we're not good at.
I met Shaquille O'Neal once. It's purely and utterly by accident, to be completely honest. He was playing basketball. I was on an American basketball exchange in Louisiana and Florida, and he was playing a game, and we were there, but he knew my coach at the time, but I had no idea who this guy was. He was just absolutely massive. And I was, to be completely honest, I was sitting next to my coach because I didn't have any lunch money, and the rest of my team went to get lunch, and I was the dingo that didn't have any lunch money, so I had to sit next to my coach, and my coach said to me, make sure you watch this guy, one day he's going to be huge. And I went, he already is huge, he's like massive. Anyway, after the game, I was still there sooking because I had no lunch, and my coach was like, sit here and watch this, and I sort of was grumbling about it, to be completely honest, but then this guy came over, and I'm quite tall, but he towered over me, and because I had an Aussie accent, and he was probably a little bit struck by that. He wanted to have a chat. So, but I didn't know who he was. He was just this dude that was really tall, and that was probably, I don't know, 1990 or something like that. Yeah, it was a long time ago. And he must have been in Louisiana or playing somewhere around there at the time, or on some basketball team or something. But he asked a bucket load of questions that I didn't know how to answer, and they seem to think that like koalas and kangaroos are pets. Like they seem to think that.
Well, we do ride them to school. So.
Yeah, it was quite funny, but I don't remember the conversation. But it'd have to have something to do with, you know, Aussie animals or something like that. But my coach sort of said, you know, one day he's going to be famous. Mark my words. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm hungry. I want my lunch. But yeah.
Yeah, and then he was famous.
Did turn out to be famous. I saw him on the TV yesterday, actually. Yeah.
So then I think the next page on your list has some places you've travelled to, which I've heard about some of them and they sound pretty impressive.
Yeah, I love it. I love travelling. It's been really hard with COVID, not being able to go anywhere. But I'm very grateful for the places that I have been able to visit. I got a bit addicted to it in sort of like my late, you know, teens and early 20s, and before I had a kid, that stopped me from spending much time overseas. I did make the mistake of taking a 13-year-old around the world. I'm not sure if, you know, who you ask, that would be that there was a big mistake, but I think hopefully Keegan sort of enjoyed it. But it was very tough on me going around the world with a kid that wants to sleep all day when you're a 13-year-old boy. But yeah, I've just written down some things that Jack and I have been talking about, and I guess if I go through them and you tell me what you want to... Yeah, I think
we'd do that again, yeah.
I've been to the Maldives a couple of times, and they've got really cool sort of glass floors in their rooms where you look at the fish. I got stuck in a flash flood in Bali, and that's a pretty crazy story. I've been in a fire evacuation in a hotel in Bangkok. That was a bit scary. I was billeted in America playing basketball, and that was really cool. Went to Sri Lanka in 2019. That was a really good trip. And I took my son when he needed to get his hours up for his driver's license. We decided to drive to Tasmania because I needed 120 hours to get racked up. Thought that was a good idea. I've been camping on a deserted island in the wet Sundays. Keegan and I walked into Machu Picchu. That was really cool. Amsterdam was amazing in minus 15 degrees. I've stalked Bono on St. Patrick's Day in Dublin and found his house. That was a bit stalkerish though. I was followed for a day in Mexico, which was really quite scary. Athens Olympics, that was pretty amazing, but a bit hair-raising at the same time. So these are just the things that I've just been writing down this morning.
I think the first one that stuck out to me was the flash flood story in Bali.
Yeah, that was really interesting. My sister has a bit of an OCD situation in relation to hygiene. And we were in a mall in Kuta, and it just started to rain, and it was like, oh, sweet, it's raining, let's just get something to eat. When we walked outside, it was probably about 1.5 meters, like it was up to my chest, and the electronic doors in the shopping centre were really going crazy and locking people in and out. And then so what had happened is there was no way for this water to get out. And it was really scary, to be completely honest. And it was like when you looked outside, there was like a sort of a tsunami coming down the road, and we were sort of in this holding pattern. We couldn't get in or out. And then my sister, you can imagine what it's like when everything comes out of the drains in the streets in Bali. Yeah. It all sort of comes up, and so you can imagine the colour of the water. So I had this sister of mine who's 5'8", climbing my spine to try and get herself out of the water, and I was certainly in it. and it was pretty horrendous, and the water just kept rising, and we sort of found ourselves swimming out of a shop front, which is really quite scary. Apparently it happens a fair bit because they don't have the flash flood water sort of system. Like, well, you know, it just doesn't go anywhere. It's got nowhere to go until it gets back to the ocean type thing. So, yeah, it was pretty scary. Yeah. My sister will never forget it. She thought we were going to drown in sewage, but, yeah, it was pretty disgusting.
Yeah, that sure does. I've never been caught in a situation like that.
Not fun.
No, it doesn't sound like it. So then at school, we did a bit of projects on Machu Picchu, which I think is a pretty cool place. Yeah, for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
So what was that like to see that in person?
Yeah, I was really quite sceptical, again, of taking a 13-year-old on a hike into a place like that. So I was quite nervous about that, and I thought it's probably be better to bus it in or to train it in or however else we could get in there. But I'd had some friends that had done it before and said the experience of walking in was just amazing. So I sort of made a bit of a bargain with Keegan. I said, I'll take you to Barcelona FC, which is high up on his soccer list of things to do, if he would walk into Machu Picchu with me. So we come to that sort of arrangement and he agreed to it. Probably one of the best things I've ever done, to be completely honest. I had no idea what I was in for. I hadn't studied at the school. I didn't really understand it. And we had the most phenomenal tour guide, which is worth his weight in gold, to be completely honest. And, yeah, we walked in and we walked past and into a lot more amazing things just as good as Machu Picchu itself on the way, which most tourist people that bypass that process probably wouldn't get the opportunity.
I think a lot of people do sometimes travel for the big things and miss stuff on the way.
I was pretty scared. Like the town that you go to meet all these people is quite sketchy, but it was so worth it in the end. Chronically expensive. It's an absolute tourist rip-off, but I think it's well worth the opportunity. You can get a train and a bus. You can get up there by bus. You know, if you had to, you just get on a train and get to the bottom and come up in a bus. But, you know, you're up there with another 2,000 or 3,000 people on the same day. When you walk in, you get the opportunity to be there sort of at sunrise, which is really amazing, before the 1,000 people rock up.
Yeah.
Because you can't get a photo without 200 people in the photo. But, yeah, amazing. I think Keegan, my son, who's now 21, would... he may hopefully remember that. Yeah. Yeah. Which is good.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah. I was bored as batshit though, sitting in a Barcelona football stadium staring at grass. But anyway, whatever makes you tick, I guess.
Yeah, so then the next thing that stuck out to me was Amsterdam. What exactly is minus 15 weather like?
Oh, I think it's dead set horrible. Again, I was with my sister in another crazy experience, and we were stuck in a 4-story building, which I guess these days you'd call them an Airbnb. But we had booked this thing, and she had a small child, and so she had a really young infant actually, and I had and Keegan, I can't remember how old he was, but I was that cold that we had all of our belongings on our bodies. Like we actually had, it was probably worse than minus 15 to be honest, because that doesn't sound like much after the Olympics we've just had and what they went through. But snow clothes upon earmuffs, upon beanies, upon everything we owned. And I sort of had a bit of we worked out that the apartment that we're in had no centralised heating, which meant all the pipes were frozen, the toilets were frozen, you know, all the water in the building was frozen, and we were also going to freeze. So I chucked a bit of a banana and said to my sister, if you guys want to freeze here to death, that's okay, but I'm out. So I packed up my son and took our sumo clothes that we were wearing and our little backpacks, and I went and checked us into a hotel and said, I just can't do it. This is just going to kill us. And she followed me. So... Yeah. It's the most beautiful place though, but it's dead set freezing in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
Gorgeous canal place. Yeah. But cold weather's horrible. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, cold weather doesn't really agree with me either.
No. Yeah.
So then you said the Athens Olympics were really quite amazing. Do you want to finish us off with that?
Yeah, sure. The Athens Olympics, I had really wanted to experience after the Sydney 2000 experience that I had, which was just, some of the best times I've ever had in my life. It was just gobsmacking, the people that we got to meet and the experiences we got to have and the group that we were with. And when we went to Athens, I was sort of expecting a similar sort of experience, but I was fairly wrong in that one. Just a different ball game, just completely different way of living and environment. And unfortunately, they just didn't have the resources or it's just a different environment, I guess. You come out from the airport expecting, transport systems and to get you to A to B, and that just wasn't the case. And, they have dug these ginormous holes with the intention of putting palm trees in the ground, but the poor palm trees never made it into the ground. They sort of sat next to the holes, and Olympics came and gone. And I just think they ran out of time and ran out of resources and ran out of money. And it was the Olympics itself, the competition was just as amazing. And I got to see some crazy good Australian basketball games, and I had some friends of mine that were playing, so that was really important to me. And we went and saw some soccer and some other sports, but we slept on gravel, literally, in a tent, which they sort of misled us fairly. Yeah, it was just really, there was nowhere to stay, there was nowhere to eat, there was nowhere to, it was pretty dodgy. But an amazing experience. It only makes you stronger, these things, but I'm not a fan of gravel or sleeping or sleeping on gravel.
Yeah, gravel's one thing, but sleeping on it's another.
Yeah, you can't really call accommodation in a situation like that a tent on gravel with no bathrooms, but that's okay. We got through it and we're still here to tell the story. But amazing. Makes you. I
definitely think the Olympics is one thing I do want to go to and see in person.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've worked our way to the end of your second list.
Yeah.
I think, thank you for sharing your travels and famous people you've met.
Anytime.
I think, I hope everyone listening enjoyed it as well, as much as I did.
Thank you for having me.
That's all right. I appreciate you coming on. And thank you for being able to, share some of your stories with me.
No worries.
So, all right, guys, that's the end of this week's episode. I hope you come back next week for another episode with another one of my good friends. I think our plan is to talk about music. I feel like you guys will enjoy it if you enjoy music as much as I do.
Sounds fun.
Thank you, Allie, and thank you guys for listening.
See you, Jack.
See you soon.